Good evening, everyone, and really looking forward to a wonderful conversation this evening with Naina. We're just going to wait a couple more seconds to let more participants come in. So good evening, everyone, and really looking forward to a wonderful conversation this evening on the future of philanthropy, building effective networks for social impact. We have with us Naina Subberwal Batra, the CEO of AVPN. And before we begin the conversation with Naina, we'll just spend a minute talking about ILSS, India Leaders for Social Sector. ILSS is all about people. We believe people are the key to achieving lasting social change. But the idea of ILSS is to be a capacity building organization where we look to build, nurture and strengthen the capacities for India's development sector through catalytic impact to achieve catalytic impact at scale. Some of the programs that we run at ILSS, and the objective is three-pronged. We look at infusing talent by bringing in senior corporate leaders into the social sector through a learning journey and helping them transition, which is our flagship leadership program. We've also been, of course, working with social sector leaders through a whole gamut of programs for them, like the fundraising program, our people practices program. We also have a board program. And of course, the idea is to create a network of people to accelerate impact and build communities of learning. These are just some of our programs that we offer at ILSS. And now to welcome our guest for this evening, Naina. Naina is, interestingly, a crossover. She joined AVPN as CEO from September 2013 and was appointed chairperson in 2018 to 21. Naina's leadership over the past 8.5 years has nurtured the AVPN community, growing the membership base by more than 4x and elevating the organization into a truly regional force for good. Under her direction, the organization has grown from focusing only on venture philanthropy to supporting the entire ecosystem of social investors, from catalytic philanthropists to impact investors and corporate CSR professionals. She's also been instrumental in developing AVPN's innovative services, like the collaborative pooled funds that connect, empower, and educate the now 600 members of AVPN. In 2021, she was featured in the list of Asia's most influential by Tatler Asia, and in 2019, awarded one of Asia's top sustainability superwoman by CSR Remarks. So delighted to have you here, Naina, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Anu. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
So, we have to start with the global conference that just happened. So congratulations on the success. We've been seeing so much of it on social media. A lot of our colleagues in the sector were there in Bali. I'm sorry I missed it, but I'm going to make sure I'm there the next time. Before we talk about other aspects of AVPN, but also of your leadership journey, what were some of the key themes that emerged from this conference that you could share? That, this was a conference hopefully after the pandemic. What could you share about what was some of the themes emerging from the conference?
Sure. So thanks, Anu, and I'm going to hold you to coming to our conference in 2023. The conference was a great success, and I think more than the fact that we had 1,100 delegates who came, I feel that the kind of feedback that we got around the content and what was discussed was very, very positive. So, when you're faced with the disruptive consequences of something as significant as the pandemic that we've all gone through, our ecosystem, I believe, responded with a rallying call for more trust. I strongly feel that there is a clear call to address the unequal power dynamics between funder and grantee and move towards a more trust-based philanthropy. Programmatic outputs and outcomes with a strict adherence to sort of time-consuming, complex reporting models undercut the impact organization's ability to focus on what truly matters, which is solving the most pressing and social and environmental issues in Asia. So we had a journalist from Alliance, Andrew Milner, who's been coming for a long time to our conference. And he put it, I thought, quite well, that, you know, when an uneven power dynamic forms the basis of the relationship, it's virtually impossible for funders to have honest and open relationships with non-profit partners. And given that we are a funders network, this was something that was an overriding theme. And just to give you an example of what this looks like in practice, I think our delegates talked about flexible funding. They talked about the fact that only 5% of the funding given during the pandemic was unrestricted. We at AVPN, in fact, launched our philanthropic funds, which you talked about in the introduction, which are basically committed to deploying unrestricted funding. And to date, over the course of the pandemic, we have deployed more than $11 million in unrestricted funding through our pooled funds. And we now have an ambitious target to launch a new fund of $25 million to support women and girls across Asia. So at the conference, a couple of our pooled funds were launched. We also saw trust-based funding surface again in numerous panel discussions that we had around how philanthropists have looked at making their practices to be bold, trying to take risks, trying to be more catalytic. For impact investors who are also there at our conference, they were looking at how do they sort of fund what is called the valley of death. So most impact investors either sit in early stages or at the very end when the solution is mature or it has shown a proof of success. But a lot of investee organizations sort of fail in the middle, and the space where the enterprise is actually looking for support to scale up to a sustainable enterprise, but is not yet investment ready from a commercial perspective. So we had discussions about how do you actually fund there. We also discussed how social investors can be the force who deploy catalytic capital and invest it in a way that address the capital gaps that have been left by mainstream capital. So I think, just to kind of cap it, I think a clear call from our conference was, asking philanthropists and investors to not be afraid to make mistakes and not confuse mistakes with failure, but instead be brave and catalytic and actually put trust in the investee organizations that they want to support.
And that's fantastic, Naina. And I think it's so powerful and so needed. And I do want to ask you, though, that why is it, and this is a question that has come up again and again. Bridgespan has just come out with their second report on ending the starvation cycle, etc. What holds back trust? And I want to actually put this back on those, SPOs. Are we not being in some way able to talk? Is there a perception that we are not being able to overcome? What really is, causing this trust to carry on? Any thoughts? Because I think this is so needed. One is doing the hard work. Why is there a perception that, or just trying to delve into this a little bit?
So it's really interesting. And I'm really glad you asked this, Anu, because I feel very strongly about this, and I will be, very blunt on what I think the issue is. There is the role of ego here. For a lot of philanthropists, the ego comes from the power that they hold because of the power of the dollars or, the capital that they are choosing to deploy. It is, unfortunately, I feel, an ego that is misplaced, because a philanthropist takes glory from what has been achieved through his or her philanthropy. And that achievement is actually done by the organization that is on the ground, that is at the coalface. the same philanthropist has no problem taking risks when it comes to business. But when it comes to philanthropy, most philanthropists across the spectrum, across Asia, geographical borders notwithstanding, and we run a network that goes far beyond India. I will tell you that most philanthropists, when it comes to their philanthropy, are the most risk averse. And that is, again, such a dichotomy. Philanthropy is supposed to be money that you give away. You are not expecting a financial return on it. So why are you so worried about how that money is spent? If you really look at it, you should be taking the most amount of risks with that money. You should be supporting innovation. You should be being, you should be catalytic. You should be trying new things, because that is money that is supposed to be used, and not, you're not going in with any expectation of return. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't put in metrics which are balanced, which are mutually agreed upon by the investee organization and yourself, and which are not unnecessarily bureaucratic or complex. It would also really help if funders talk to each other, especially when they are funding the same organization, and put in a standard set of metrics. Oftentimes you have organizations that are spending more time filling up forms and doing reports rather than actually doing the job that we are giving them to do. The other thing is the fact that we expect every dollar to be spent towards an outcome or an output, but we are reluctant to spend on the capacity of an organization or building the resilience of that organization. So if you are not going to do that, if you don't have strong organizations, how are they going to produce sustainable results over and over again? I mean, we have a very small pool of nonprofits. We have every funder wanting to fund systems change. I hear that all the time. What I want to ask these funders is, where are the organizations that are capable of delivering systems change? There are only a handful of organizations that can absorb that kind of capital that you want to drive systems change. So the first goal should be actually to build up a pipeline of organizations that will be capable of delivering change that is at a systems level.
Absolutely. My goodness, Naina, this is so powerful what you shared, and in so many ways resonates with what we truly believe it at ILSS. We believe in the middle, because while everyone's celebrating the philanthropists, and of course everyone's focused on the end beneficiary or stakeholder, who is focused on the middle, the people actually delivering on the ground. And there was a very interesting TED talk, or not TED talk, there was a talk by this, American marketing guru called Seth Godin. He talks about fundraising as well. And he had said, listen, if the problems that the sector is trying to solve were so easy to solve, the markets would have solved them. Exactly. You're doing something that people are not able to solve. So why are we apologetic, or why are we not rewarded enough for stepping up to do that work? So it was more a mindset for for the nonprofit community to to internalize that, listen, we are doing something that's hard. If it was easy, it would have been solved. So absolutely resonate in how you articulated this, Naina, and I'm smiling from year to year because it's so powerful and so needed and almost needs to be amplified. I'm going to just now segue into a little bit about AVPN. Just for the audience here, you've been leading AVPN. Share the historical evolution, and also, what was the idea behind AVPN and what was the genesis? And
it's interesting, actually. I now talk a lot about the fact that we need to be, looking amongst our own communities, and we need to be looking more eastwards when you look at solutions. I feel very strongly that the West has not always been able to solve these problems well, and neither have the models that they have put in place worked effectively. So we actually need to look east, and we need to look amongst people that are like ourselves to come up with models that actually work. But having said that, AVPN was actually established in 2011 in Singapore by an American private equity investor who was looking to replicate an idea and a network that he had established in Europe in 2005. So Doug Miller, who is the founder of AVPN and was the founder of EVPA as well, looked at venture philanthropy as something that he believed would be the most ideally suited to really looking at addressing the most difficult problems and addressing problems that were not, sort of in everybody's radar in the most effective fashion. So he formed the European Venture Philanthropy Association in 2005, and then came to Asia in 2011 and seeded the AVPN. We were formed in Singapore because we had support from the Singapore government. And it was interesting. I joined in 2013, not really actually understanding myself what venture philanthropy was at that point. And as I started talking to at that time, we had about 120 odd members, I realized that they also did not resonate so much with venture philanthropy. So I think, over the course of time, we really expanded the network to go beyond venture philanthropy. For a lot of Asians, venture was about business and philanthropy was doing good, and they didn't quite see how they could balance the two. It was very much left brain, right brain. And so we then, chose to articulate our value proposition as a platform for practitioners to share knowledge, build capacity that was centered on the Asian context, offering practical solutions, allowing a space for sharing challenges, best practices, collective learning, and more importantly, with a bias towards action. So as we grew the network, Anu, what was really important was that we actually really push our members to act. And by act, I mean to deploy capital. There are a lot of networks where commitments are made, pledges are made, but if you actually go back and examine how much capital has actually moved, it is negligible. But what we can tell you is that as a network, we are very unique, where we actually try and answer, when philanthropists pose problems to us saying, much harder to give money away than it is to make money, we'll give you solutions on how it is easy to give money away and how you can choose from, a philanthropic fund to a social impact bond to partnering with somebody else. So you run out of excuses to say, why am I not doing this? So as a network, we have chosen to actually also offer solutions and offer concrete examples where capital can actually be deployed.
And I'm going to actually, before I come to the question on your leadership journey, because for us and our audience, there are lots of corporate crossover, but not crossovers as yet, but a lot of corporate leaders who are looking at the development sector and trying to figure out what can they do and how can they be of value. And we do believe they can be. And so I will come to that question on your learnings and your journey. But tell us a little bit about this very interesting, collaboration, the Bright Star collaboration. It'll throw flavor on some of the work that's been happening. So, I read about the Kellogg's initiative, which was the Bright Star collaboration to fight malnutrition. So how did that come about? Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, what happens is, you talked a little bit about our conference in the very beginning, and, you asked me how it went. I'll give you a reason why our conference is actually very unique. The conference is unique because it brings uncommon people together. So what really happens is it's not just foundations, it's not just corporate CSR, it's not just intermediaries, it's not just policymakers, it's actually all of the above. So what happens is that you meet people without really realizing that they might be doing something similar to what you're doing. And, that's basically what happened with Sesame, Kellogg, and Bright Start. So they met at the AVPN conference, I believe in 2018 in Singapore, and realized that they were all interested in addressing the problem of morning hunger in India. And through that conference, they actually realized that, instead of each doing their own, they could actually collaborate and start by working together. And in order to do that, we actually saw a partnership come across that that led to a program of addressing morning hunger that used Sesame Street characters, was driven by Bright Start, and was funded by Kellogg. So, that's some of the things that actually start at AVPN, but continue well beyond AVPN.
Fascinating. Naina, I'm going to ask you a little bit about your journey. Tell us how you came to join AVPN. What were you doing prior to this? And what's been your learnings?
Okay, so I kind of stumbled onto AVPN, Anu, if I'm to be totally candid. Before AVPN, I was working with Monitor in India, which is a strategy consulting firm, but I worked in their mission, sort of mission-driven practice, which was Monitor Inclusive Markets. I was one of the first people that joined Monitor Inclusive Markets in India, and that was really looking at how you could use strategic guidance. How could you use consulting skills to really help scale solutions that were aimed at the bottom of the pyramid. At that point, when I joined Monitor, I had no idea that you even had these kinds of models in 2008 that really looked at addressing, either low-cost housing, looking at low-cost education, healthcare, and in sustainable ways, in looking at sustainable business models. So, that got me really interested, and it was fascinating because we looked at over 200 business models, which reached, which then resulted in a report called Emerging Markets, Emerging Models, which was taught in Columbia then for a number of years. And we identified 7 that if they had the right infusion of capital and non-financial support, they could potentially scale. And a few of them are well-known names right now, like Zikitsa, the ambulance service, Lifespring, it was a low-cost maternity healthcare unit, Gyanshala, which did education, etc. So it was very fascinating, and I learned a lot. Before that, I'd worked in the corporate sector. I, dabbled in art. I'd done all sorts of things. So in 2013, I moved to Singapore because my husband's job took him to Singapore, and I got headhunted by a recruitment firm to head AVPN. I had no idea what AVPN was. I had no idea what a network was, and I'd never worked in Asia. So the first year, I thought to myself, and I said, "Chalo, let's do this for 2 years. I'll know enough about the sector, and I'll find a proper job." Almost 9 years, I'm still here, but I can tell you it's been the most fascinating learning journey that anyone could have been on. And I've been really privileged to learn so much about, how philanthropy, how giving, how social investment has developed across Asia. And, it's interesting. I've seen it, almost quadruple in terms of amounts that have been given, in terms of innovation that has taken place, and also in terms of it becoming more mainstream, where we are now talking with the likes of the monetary authorities of Singapore, of Malaysia, the stock exchanges, to really see how corporates can, really look at a triple bottom line, if not a quadruple bottom line, in terms of how they declare their results, what really happens. And it's become far more than, a niche sector where you only look at philanthropy as some sort of charity that you do, but it's much more about how do we mainstream this? How do we actually create change in our lifetime, at least if not in our lifetime, in our children's lifetimes? And I think, the imperative moral, economic, social has become so strong that, it is probably a far more mainstream career than I would have ever thought when I got into it.
I hope my audience is listening carefully because there's a lot to be done here. And, Naina, I do get this question when I speak to some, senior folks, and they'll say, well, we come from, strong technology or finance, whatever backgrounds, and how can I do this? What can I do here? There's just so much to be done. And, and especially in India, you can walk 100 meters and you'll find 7 things you could solve for. But I wanted to ask you, philanthropy also sometimes seems to, like in India, we joke that, education is the cricket of philanthropy. Everyone wants to fund education, and there's almost, that's where the bulk of the monies go. So
and everyone wants to educate girls.
and everyone wants to educate. It's all good. I'm not taking away from that, any of it. But, what do there are underserved causes, and what have you all done in terms of maybe, pushing some of those, agendas or causes that don't historically get the attention?
So I think, that's a really good question, Anu. And, just to be clear, education is the first thing that any philanthropist funds. It's because most philanthropists have made their money, especially those where it's first generation money, have made their money because of education. And they see that as a way out of poverty, as a way of economic advancement, as a way of let's teach the person how to fish rather than giving them a grant, etc., etc. So it's not just, limited to India. Everybody wants to fund education. I think what actually we don't realize is that there is a lot of, I think there is a lot of benefit in actually sharing data. A lot of our philanthropists, especially those that have made their money in new age businesses, rely a lot on data and are also very clear that they want to make an impact. The younger the philanthropists, they are much more clear they don't want to do the same old thing. So we are finding a lot less now, even though the quantums are still, very high, that is in brick and mortar philanthropy. You don't find as many philanthropists now that say that I want my name on that building, or I'm going to build another school. You're finding a lot more philanthropists in India as well as outside India that are saying, okay, if I want to fund education, I will actually look at supporting the existing infrastructure, whether that's actually working with government, whether that's working with other players to really strengthen something that is already there rather than recreate a wheel and actually, benefit a very, very small cohort. I mean, when I first started and I would meet different philanthropists in India, I was horrified, right? You had some really, really wealthy people being really excited about the fact that they were educating 350 children. We are a country of 1.2 billion people, 350 children. And then you're telling me, oh, can you find someone who can match fund my contribution so that, these children can go for higher education? So you have that as well. And, it's at these times where I think we have to get over the awe of who that person is and actually really ask that question openly and say, is that the impact you want to create in a country that is this big? So, but I find a lot of newer, sort of people who are entering this space are much more focused on scale, on impact, on actually doing different things. And I'll give you an example. We're just doing a pool fund on STEM education for women and girls, but it's not about getting more girls into STEM subjects. It's actually seeing what happens after they get a STEM education. Why are there less women and girls in STEM jobs? So, that's a different thing versus saying, okay, now let's get more girls into science education. If you really look at a lot of the statistics, in a lot of, especially the younger ages, there are more girls doing science than there are boys, but they drop out. So what are the reasons for them dropping out? Can we actually, fund organizations that actually are looking at ways to keep them in STEM, to actually get them into STEM careers? So that's where I think, a nuanced approach, an approach that's actually based on data. Another example I'll give you, when I started out with AVPN, climate was probably number 8 or 9 in terms of what people funded. In the last 2 years, climate has been the most rapidly moving up that hierarchy of needs. It's still education, followed by health, followed by livelihood, but now climate is number 4. And, you really think about it, that climate change is something that is affecting us all. Yes, it seems like a big, hairy problem. It seems it's going to be, too much for one person to do, but it doesn't mean that we can ignore it. What I'm finding is that philanthropists address climate change issues. They just don't call it climate change issues. So that's what is interesting. And that's where, we need to continuously highlight these kinds of stories. There is a philanthropist in Pune who supports garbage collection and has switched to using electric cars to actually collect garbage. So, you're dealing with something that causes climate pollution, that causes air pollution, and you're addressing it. But in your mind, I'm not doing anything towards climate. I'm actually, doing garbage collection. So that's the, that's the nuance.
No, absolutely. And in fact, it's interesting that I have an organization that we follow very closely, one of my students, I was at Ashoka Naina before here, and she runs a wonderful organization on waste management and sort of, and it's a for-profit venture. And she's doing a lot of work in tier 2, tier 3 cities of Maharashtra. And then I was recently in the south on a visit, and I went to this lovely place, and I met the folks who do the waste management in this beautiful hill station. And she was saying she's looking for funds, she's not getting funds. And I was like, but there may be a way to make it sustainable. So why don't we connect you to the folks in Maharashtra who are running a similar organization, now being sort of pursued by the government, by the municipal government to come and do the waste. So I think sometimes it's just amplifying the work that's happening. So people are maybe even picking up the causes, but just not getting the models right. Because it could be sustainable. It is sustainable in one part. Maybe the context is different, but I know I'm out of time and Isha's pinging me and questions are adding, but I want to ask you one last slightly provocative question, Naina. Is in the Asian context, is India not seen as place to necessarily fund in terms of priority? Is there a perception that maybe countries, neighboring countries might need the funds more and funds may not be coming to India? Is that something you have seen? Is that a reality?
So I don't think so. Actually, I think India is the big elephant in the room. What happens, unfortunately, for a lot of Western funders is that for them, Asia stops at India. India, the problems in India are so complex, the challenges are so complex, the inequality is so large that, there is no question that it's a very important country. It's also really important for a lot of funders that are looking for scale. In India, a pilot program is 50,000, I mean, when we do a pilot, we say, okay, 50,000, we are going to test. But, if you're looking at Indonesia, you're looking at Vietnam, you're looking at Cambodia or Laos, they're small countries, right? They're not going to be able to, show that kind of thing. But what are issues is that it's becoming increasingly difficult for foreign funders to fund in India. And they are finding, the legal hurdles to be very difficult to cross, which is why they are looking beyond India. It's also, I think, interesting for social investors in India, as well as for nonprofit leaders leading nonprofits in India, to actually look eastward. I think we've grown up looking towards the West. We don't really look east. And, both from a socio-political perspective, if India really wants to have an influence in the East, and China has a big influence in the East, the social sector is a great way to actually get that. We have some of the strongest civil society organizations. We have some amazing models that have, had a very strong proof of concept. We can actually go out and say, hey, in education, this has worked. In India, this will work. In Indonesia, this will work. In Malaysia. In fact, there is a Indian school leaders initiative which actually works with the training school leaders, that has been transplanted from India and Malaysia and Indonesia, and now I believe they are going to Latin America and Africa. So I think there is a lot that we can do in terms of also giving and being role models for the rest of Asia. And I feel that we don't do enough.
No, true. In fact, we run a whole program for senior corporate leaders to understand the development sector in a holistic perspective, and a lot of now getting a lot of diaspora attending these online courses, and we feel like we've had some people from Mauritius, and they said, it's so complex here. Everything seems so much easier, when we go back home and sort of talk about some of these very, very complex problems. So absolutely, there's a lot, but I agree with you that there's a lot of learning from the organizations countries like Vietnam and how they've handled their education, or from Korea and South Korea and so on.
And I mean, if you really think about it, China has lifted 700 million people from absolute poverty. There is something we can learn from that. They have, looked at eradicating malaria from large portions of their country. There is something we can learn from that. So, I think there are models that do work in this part of the world, which are more easily transplanted both in India and vice versa. And, that's another thing that AVPN tries to do, is really connect countries across Asia to, look at both solutions, problems, as well as, sort of funding models and champions. We launched the Asia Gender Network, which is a group of women from, I believe it's now 15 Asian countries that are coming together because they really believe that they want to, through their own philanthropy, influence the lives of women and girls. And, they are talking with their peers across different Asian countries. And we are finding that they are learning a lot. They are inspiring each other. They are, being role models for each other, which is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm being told by Isha again and again, my time is up. So Isha, I'm going to hand it over to you because there are questions piling up. So
thank you so much, Anu, and thank you, Naina, for this lovely conversation. Yes, there are a lot of questions, so I'll go one by one. We have a question from Vishal Kumar, and this is around CSR, right? The expectations of compliance and reporting are so high from CSR donors. Many of them think of the CSR spends as a branding opportunity, interfering with varying levels in the program. Yes, they consider, and yet they consider all HR cost as indirect costs and cap it at ridiculously low levels. How best to educate such donor? How do you engage with this mindset? And what can something like an AVPN or somebody sitting on a network do to move this mindset?
So, it's really interesting, Vishal, and I'll give you an example of how we have engaged with CSR donors. So our pool funds, and we have 7 of them right now, the majority of the investors in these pooled philanthropic funds are actually corporate foundations. And that's where it's been really interesting because most of them have never done a pooled fund before. They have actually had to go back and, convince their boards. They have also, never really given up control in terms of deciding what what the nonprofit would do or where their money would go. So their money is basically being pooled with others. We were very clear that any money that we gave through an AVPN administered pooled fund would be for core operating expenses and not for project costs. And it would be left to the nonprofits to decide how they wanted to spend the money. But coming back to your issue, I think the CSR law, there is that's where it's challenging in India because we have not been able to do a pooled fund in India yet, precisely for this reason, because the law requires you to report on projects and project outcomes versus on actually delivering organizational capacity and building an organizational pipeline. So I think there is a little bit of change that we need to bring about in that law itself in terms of what is counted as a valid CSR spend. And again, we have so many corporates that are our members, even from India. I will be the first to tell you that the CSR managers, unfortunately, are not, are not the villains. They are really not. They want to do good. They are oftentimes really stretched. And they also come under a lot of pressure from diverse sources, such as, the management's family, which may be saying now support this nonprofit, which really has nothing to do with the strategy that they might have developed for the organization. There is usually a CSR committee where no one can agree on where the CSR funds should go. So there are a lot of issues that they also are dealing with. And most organizations, irrespective of the size of their CSR budget, are woefully understaffed when it comes to, actually having good CSR people there. So I would say, be a little bit giving in terms of what they can or cannot do and build a relationship with that CSR manager. I think sometimes it's actually relationship building on an individual level, which will hopefully, result in a better outcome.
Thank you, Naina. This also answers question by Tejaswini, who asked that a lot of times CSR teams look very disconnected from the cause, and how do you address that? And I hope Tejaswini got her answer on this. Moving to philanthropy vis-a-vis impact investing, Gautam has a question here. Is there a difference in the way the matrices and the parameters for both these mode of giving work? And what are they like? If you can share some overview. It is venture philanthropist versus impact investors. That's his question.
So I think impact, so, at the core, if done correctly, both need to have impact that is embedded in the business model. unfortunately, sometimes when investors are looking for a financial return, they start with the impact hypothesis, but very soon it moves to the financial health of the organization. And then the focus is on financial returns, sometimes pushing that entrepreneur away from his or her impact journey. So, that's the kind of critical thing. Whereas philanthropy is always focused only on impact, and it's not necessarily focused at all on financial returns. But when you're looking at impact investing, or you're looking at, social investing, you are expecting not just that organization to be financially sustainable, but actually to be giving or generating financial returns. The problem happens when expectations are mismatched with regards to where that organization is. So that organization may not yet be at a developed stage where it can, give you 2x returns, or you even 1x returns. That organization might still be requiring support in terms of IT or strategy or HR. And unless and until you can do that, you're not going to be able to see financial returns. So you need, impact investors actually need also to go beyond just making that investment to really looking at mentoring and being a partner with the business.
Thank you so much, Naina. I hope Gautam got his answer. We have another very interesting question, which is also my question to you, which is, are there any critical barriers? And for me, the question was more cultural, but to giving in the Asian context, also specifically in the Indian context, is there a mindset which needs to be tackled to truly accelerate philanthropy to unlock its true potential?
I think trust, right? It goes across, it cuts across everything. We automatically assume that, if we don't know the non-profit, I don't know where my money is going to go. That money is going to be swallowed, it is going to be misused. I'm not sure why we have this mindset that we think that, the non-profit is going to fritter away the money. But I don't think we make that same judgment when we make a VC investment. I mean, if you really think about it, right, you have VCs all over India. Look at Bangalore, all these new startups have the latest power books, the latest swag. But yet, if a non-profit wants to get new furniture or, wants to get an AC, you're like, oh my God, no, not really. You should be suffering in the heat, because unless you're really paying for it through that, through discomfort, you're not really getting social impact. I mean, I think that's we have this idea in our head, right? I think Anu mentioned earlier, you're looking at, tackling some of the most complex problems. You should be attracting best-in-class people to solve those most complex problems and pay them at a very competitive rate. Our biggest issue is that we pay nonprofits, we expect karmic credit to make up for what we pay them in finance, financial money in this lifetime. I mean, our whole hypothesis is that, you're working in the not-for-profit sector. Are you ready to take a haircut? No. Why would you be ready to take a haircut?
I love this. Ish, I want to jump in really quickly. I know there are questions coming in, but I want to ask you, Naina, are you noticing anything different with younger philanthropists, like the next gen? Is there a different mindset? Is it more refreshing? Also, are younger people getting into philanthropy? Because, normally you think of philanthropy when you are sort of in retirement mode, etc. And then you start thinking of, your...
So I think younger people are definitely getting into impact. I wouldn't say that they're getting into philanthropy. I think where the fine line, and especially for a country like India, there cannot be a business at the bottom of the pyramid. Every single social issue cannot be answered by a social enterprise. We will always need pure philanthropy to support those that are absolutely at the bottom, where they cannot afford, they are so below the basic living wage that they're not going to be able to afford an economic solution. So I think we have to be accepting of that. And the fact that the state, in most cases, is unable to support these poorest of the poor, it's important that philanthropy plays a role there. Where I think it's interesting is that where young people are coming in is, they are coming in really pushing innovation. They are coming in wanting to be more catalytic. They are definitely coming in with a far higher appetite for risk, saying that if some of these more sort of, again and again, it's the impatience of the young, right? You want to solve these really complex problems really quickly. So you're willing to take risks, which, the older generation wasn't necessarily willing to do. For them, it was like, this is how it's been, and, this is how it is. And for some of the even older philanthropists, it's like, oh, they didn't work hard enough, or they haven't done this to, really, that's why you deserve this sort of, unequal economic situation. But that is changing. I also find it very refreshing that a lot of young people have no problems hiring good quality people to come in to solve some of these problems. They see the value of having a smart person who's committed. They see the value of actually paying for results, which is hopefully where the sector is going to go. And every time young people ask me this question, saying, how do I make ends meet? How do I stay in the sector? Well, I'll tell you, even for AVPN, we've tried our best to really be best in class as far as salaries are concerned, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to attract the right kind of people there.
Thank you so much, Naina. That's a great thought. From that, I'll move to a question by Sauradeep, and I'll come back to the talent bit again if the time allows. But there's a question by Sauradeep Roy, and he's saying that kindly share your views on funding partnerships, collaborators of NGOs instead of funding individual NGOs to amplify impact. For a century, with one NGO for every 400 people, do you feel funders should promote collaborative movement instead of NGOs working in silos and in different compartments?
So I'm going to tell you something very provocative. We can't be competitive about how we get impact done or how we drive impact. We may be competitive in business, but there is no competition in really driving social impact, because at this point we need you and you and you and you and many more yous to really drive social impact. So it's really important that funders feel comfortable and open about bringing their grantees together. If there are grantees on this call and you're funded by a number of funders, you will automatically, I think, tell me that there are very few occasions when grantees come together, and they can come together to share their own learnings. We also, unfortunately, breed a spirit of competition amongst these grantees, because we try to get them to feel that the funding pot is very finite and they're all fighting for that same pot of money. So therefore, they don't want to share learnings with each other. That's the mindset that we have to break. If we don't get good nonprofits to foster other nonprofits to also become good nonprofits, they're not going to be able to actually drive the solutions on the ground. And funders here hold all the cards. If they can bring their grantees together and they give them the confidence that, by bringing somebody new in, it doesn't mean that your funding gets reduced. It'll actually help build collaboration. It'll help foster trust. It'll actually also help you share the fact that these mistakes have been made. And, a mistake does not necessarily mean a failure.
In fact, Naina, we are both Isha and me are smiling because we run a fundraising program. And Vishal, who's asking a lot of questions, and Isha, you better ask it now because he's written many questions. Vishal, we're going to ask a question. I must tell you that one of the things we do in our fundraising program is really foster collaboration, because there's a lot of money in the country that hasn't even begun to be tapped. If you look at the US, and I always talk about this all the time. So, I mean, the people who heard me say, oh my God, she goes there again. I always say, you pay for an expensive Ivy League education, and next month they're asking you to fund, and there's no hesitation in asking. And here we don't ask. I don't think, I've never given any money to my alma mater. They never asked me either. But we saw this in our fundraising program, that when there was a Grow Fund, which is another phenomenal thing that Nagma and Vidya have done, there was a lot of exchange of information in our cohorts to fill out those applications, and everyone was helping each other, etc. And a bunch of them got it as well. So, totally resonate with you that, the idea is there has to be an abundance mentality. There's a lot more money out there. We're not all fighting for the same, but if you learn the skills, maybe you can grow that pie, because there is a pie out there that is yet to be.
And they are not your pet stable of nonprofits either. You have a good nonprofit, share with somebody else who can also come and support that nonprofit, but also take learnings from that nonprofit to somebody else. So I think, in both ways, it's not that, this is an IP that you're keeping and guarding. It's something that needs to be open source. All of this needs to be open source.
Because we're all trying to solve for the same problems. So it's not like I need to solve for it. You guys hang in there. Sorry, Isha, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, now I have a question from Shwet Bish, and this has been there for a long time, and it moves the conversation to tech. So he's saying, he or she, please correct me, tech solutions can cover multiple areas, example, women, enterprises, waste management, etc. But funding most times very focused on what are right boxes for a cause. What's your take?
So I agree. And this is where, again, it's easy for me to say this, but it's only when you reach a certain stage of maturity are you able to do that. But I think, there needs to be a little bit of organization in the not-for-profit sector, where you feel confident in saying no. And you feel confident in saying, this is what I'm going to do. Are you ready to fund this? We are, oftentimes, and I've done the same thing. I run a non-profit network, and running a network or an ecosystem player, nobody wants to fund, especially nobody in India. Everybody in India says, "Arey, network, why do I need a network? I already know everyone." I'm sure if Anu and I and, Isha sit down and spend 5 minutes talking, we'll find 10 people in common. So I already know everybody. But what they don't realize is what a network does is it intentionally brings people together. It's not just, "Arey, hi, how are you? I've met you at a party," and, we don't really talk about anything. But if you intentionally come around a room and discuss a problem, you will hopefully find a solution. So I'm talking from my own experience. Initially I would take money for anything, just because I'd be like, oh, money is coming in. And then I would try and save as much of that money to build something that nobody else wanted to fund because I felt we needed it. But, more as we've matured, I have now said no. And, I'm able now to say no because there is no other network. If you want to work in Asia, you have to come to AVPN. Even people who don't, who initially said, oh, okay, I'm going to leave and go away, have come back. Because there really isn't another ecosystem player. We are present in 12 countries. We have 79 people. And, this is what really infuriates me. People will say, 79 people. Oh my God, why do you need 79? I mean, we cover all of Asia, no? How many people does an MNC require if they want to open an office in a country? So, it's ridiculous to hold us to different standards. So the same thing comes with IT. It can't be a solution that the funder, even if it is someone who's coming from the IT, sector, says, this is what you need. They have not understood your problem. They have not done any kind of analysis. Neither have they looked at data in terms of the population that you're looking to serve. So I would actually tell you, go out on that limb and say no. Because, eventually they also want to spend the money. So they will come back. It'll take them a little while. It'll take them a little bit of, eating their own ego, but they will come back.
Thank you, Naina. Hope this helps, Shwet. Moving to another question from our alumni from the leadership program, Neeraj, who has also transitioned into the sector and works with waste management. So he says, so Naina, you spoke about funders normally miss out or even ignore the mid-stage management monitoring of social projects. How can funders become enablers and collaborate for effective, or if you like, more evolved project implementation with their partners?
So funders are trying to do that. And we've done 2 projects, actually, one in the Philippines and one in Australia, where we've actually brought local funders together. It's called the Fund for Shared Insights. We borrowed it lock, stock and barrel from the US, where we actually got funders to come together and share their insights and their issues. We also then did a program that they had in the US successfully here, which was the voice of the beneficiary. So listen for good. So, even for funders, right, they come with an idea that this is what they want to achieve with their money. Now, by the time it's, goes through, whether it is that program staff of your foundation or your CSR person, the actual result might be very different from what you anticipated initially when you thought of the intervention that you wanted to do. So having the actual end beneficiary on the table to talk about whether or not this intervention was helpful or not helpful helps the funder then really look at coming back with a better iteration of the program. So actually encouraging groups of funders to come together and talk within themselves in a so-called safe space where they can share some of their frustrations, their learnings, and their own aspirations, I think is helpful. And we've been able to do that in multiple geographies.
Thank you, Rena. And with that, I'll go back to Vishal's question because it's been there for a long, long time. So Vishal is now asking that most for-profit structures have never shown profitability for decades, yet they keep raising millions of dollars in different
Yes.
VC rounds, and non-profits are expected to create self-sustainable models to complex problems in 2 to 3 years. How to reshape this NGO pitch, which so that we can continue to attract significant amounts year on year, similar to a startup ecosystem.
Vishal is the CEO of Waste Warriors, doing seminal work in
Amazing.
waste management in the Himalayas.
Wow, amazing. So I think, Vishal, it has to be, change will come. We have to believe it's going to come, or otherwise, we are going to get so disillusioned. I think it's with everything. It begins as a movement and ends in a revolution. And that's what we need to do. We need to keep pushing and saying that this is not possible in 2 years. This is not what we are going to be able to achieve. And really kind of, shine the light on the funder that's asking that question. I mean, to your point, I laughed because, the same for-profit entities, sort of try to say that they are creating social change with their products, where, really, if you look at their own sort of in-house HR policies or labor policies, they are far from creating positive social change. But I think it's really important for us to raise these and to raise it and talk about it freely. I don't know whether it was when I turned 50 or what it was, when I just said, I really don't care anymore. And if a funder doesn't want to fund me, so be it. But I think we need to call out, and excuse my French, the bullshit. Because, if we don't do that, it's always going to be an unequal power dynamic. And that's what I started this conversation with. We have to switch the power dynamic. We really do. Because if you really think about it, at the crux of it, a philanthropist, in order to talk about what he or she has done and how they have changed the world, and this is their legacy, they need the nonprofit equally, if not more. So that relationship has to be far more equal.
Thank you, Naina. This is, as the cliche goes, music to my and I think many people's ears. This is the last and closing question as we come it's unfortunately to the end of this 1 hour, which is that what are your parting thoughts to people who are looking to invest in the sector? And it could be as philanthropists or impact investors, people who are looking to transition and work into the sector, and people who are already doing something in the sector and would from time and again feel slightly demotivated because of the capital crunches and so on and so forth.
So I think, for all three of them, the one thing I would actually say is always be open to learning. You're going to learn at every step of the way. As a philanthropist who's wanting to come in, open your mind to what you're going to learn from the sector, whether it is what you're going to learn from the beneficiary organization, whether it is what you're going to learn from the intermediary that actually helps you reach that beneficiary organization. This is learning like you've never had before. For those of us who want to work, again, go in with an open mindset. Be humble enough. You may have been a corporate CEO, you may have been a corporate leader, but some of what you're here trying to do is, as that previous question said, you're trying to move mountains using, maybe the tip of your finger. That's the kind of resources that are available. And this is where Indians should do really well, because we are the kings of frugal innovation. So, that's what it is. It's look at how far you can make a rupee go if you're in a non-profit. What kinds of jugaad we do, yeah. So, that's amazing learning in itself. So, when you're coming in, be open to learning, and you learn so many new skills that even if you decide to go back to the corporate sector, you will take an enormous amount of experience, beneficial learning with you that you would not have had. And, for those of us who have been in the sector for a very long time, try not to get jaded. We get very cynical and we get very jaded, and it's very easy to constantly bash the funder or but there are good people. And, we also have to kind of say, it doesn't matter if you're tired of having that same discussion again, have it. You never know how that person is going to respond. So I would say don't get jaded if you've been in the sector. There's a lot to get excited about. I think, we should celebrate the small victories that we have every day. Let's not wait for that huge, big windfall to come. Which will come, but it'll take time. But let's celebrate every small gain that we make, because, that's what will keep you going. Otherwise, it's very tough. It's very, very tough.
And I always say this, and I say it as much to myself as to my team, that, folks that were involved with the freedom movement in 1922 didn't know when 1947 would happen, if at all it would happen, right? But they did what they needed to do and they kept going. And so in 2022, we need to just keep going. And, and maybe there is, there will be a...
And not only that, for every one of us that is on this call, and, I'm really amazed how many of you are listening, but, we don't have a choice, right? We could have been born somewhere where we didn't have access to education. We didn't have you're here because of the genetic lottery. You didn't do anything to get here. You got here because you were born in a family that could keep you safe, that could educate you, that could give you opportunities that most people don't get. So what choice do you have? You need to give back. Doesn't matter what level, what scale, where you are, you have to give back.
This is fantastic. And then, the audience question, comments are coming in, and we'll share them with you, Naina, as well. But to all the people listening in, do share your comments for Naina and for this wonderful, wonderful conversation we've had today, and this call to action that we all need to do our bit. Thank you so much. And sorry, Isha, I just got excited and jumped in again and again.
That's the perfect end to the evening. Thank you so much, Naina, for this conversation. It's been a midweek boost to working in the sector for me personally, and I'm sure for many of the people who are joining us in the call, and a lot of them are social entrepreneurs, and some of them are thinking of becoming one.
No, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
And I know it's very late for you there in the night, but thank you so much. And
thank you very much.
Happy.
I'm looking forward to the conference next year.
Yes. I will see you there for sure.
See you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.